My name is Morgan, and before you judge me for what I'm about to say, I want you to picture this: a mansion with a marble staircase that gleams under crystal chandeliers, a garage full of imported cars, and family portraits that look like they belong in a Forbes article about the American dream. That's the world I grew up in. Or at least that's what everyone thought. But inside those walls, it wasn't perfect. Not even close. The truth is, my family's wealth was a stage prop, a mask covering the cracks in the foundation. And those cracks, they weren't just about money, they were about love, loyalty, and who counted as family in my parents' eyes. From as far back as I can remember, there was a clear favorite. And spoiler alert, it wasn't me. My younger brother Ethan could have asked for the moon, and my parents would have tried to buy it for him. A private high school that cost more than my college tuition done. A brand new Range Rover before he even had his license? Of course. And me, I got the "you'll figure it out" speech over and over again. I learned early that if I wanted something, I had to earn it myself. I worked 2 jobs through college, graduated top of my class in finance, and clawed my way into a competitive position at a major investment firm. I thought naively that if I proved myself enough, they'd finally see me. They'd finally say, "Morgan, we're proud of you." That recognition never came. No matter how many deals I closed or how many late nights I spent building my career, I was invisible in my own home. My parents looked at Ethan and saw the future. They looked at me and saw nothing worth investing in. There was only one person who ever made me feel seen: my grandmother Eleanor. She wasn't just my confidant. She was the architect of our family's fortune. A retired Wall Street trader who invested in real estate before it was trendy, she built everything from scratch. And unlike my parents, she didn't play favorites. She set up a trust fund, $5 million, split evenly between Ethan and me, no strings attached. She would always tell me, "Morgan, wealth means nothing without integrity. One day you'll have to choose between protecting what's yours and keeping the peace. And when that day comes, I hope you choose yourself." At the time, I didn't know what she meant. I just thought she was warning me about business. I didn't realize she was warning me about blood. But that day, the day she predicted, was closer than I could have imagined. And when it came, it started with a phone call that would upend everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning it all began, I was packing for the biggest pitch of my career. Chicago, 30 floors up in a glass tower, a room full of potential investors whose signatures could double my firm's portfolio overnight. I'd been preparing for weeks, late nights, endless revisions of my presentation, even rehearsing in front of my bathroom mirror until the words rolled off my tongue like second nature. That's when my phone rang. "Morgan." My mother's voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. "It's Grandma. She had a bad fall. You need to come home. Now." Every muscle in my body went cold. My grandmother was the one person I couldn't bear to lose, the one who believed in me when no one else did. Without thinking, I dropped the blouse I'd been folding, opened my laptop, and sent my assistant a 2-line email: "Cancel Chicago. Family emergency." 2 hours later, I was speeding down I-95 toward her estate, the knot in my stomach growing tighter with every mile. My mind kept replaying every possibility: broken bone surgery, maybe worse. I gripped the steering wheel until my fingers ached, praying she'd be okay. When I finally pulled into her driveway, I practically sprinted to the front door and froze. There she was, sitting in her favorite armchair, sipping tea, the Wall Street Journal neatly folded in her lap. Not a scratch, not even a bruise. "Morgan," she said, setting her cup down, "what on earth are you doing here?" My words stumbled over themselves. "Mom called. She said you fell, that you were hurt bad." Her eyes darkened in a way I'd never seen before. "She told you that." I nodded, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. She exhaled slowly, like she was releasing a weight she'd been carrying far too long. "I told her I wouldn't lie to you. Guess she found another way." I stood there feeling the ground shift beneath me. Why would she? Before I could finish, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Out of habit, I pulled it out. One swipe and my stomach dropped. Instagram. A photo of my entire family: parents, Ethan, aunts, uncles, standing barefoot on white sand, sunglasses on, drinks in hand. Bahamas, baby Ethan's caption read. And right beneath it, "Nothing beats family time in paradise." Family time without me. I stared at the screen until the image blurred. My grandmother's voice was gentle but laced with anger. "They never planned to take you, sweetheart." And that's when it hit me: this wasn't just about a vacation. This was about erasing me from the picture altogether. I sank into the couch, my phone still in my hand, the betrayal slicing deeper with every breath. I'd missed the most important meeting of my career because of a lie, a deliberate, calculated lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call my mother right then and there and demand to know why. But instead, I just sat there letting the realization sink in. They'd crossed a line they could never uncross. Before I go any further, tell me something. Have you ever been completely cut out of something that mattered? Left out not by accident, but on purpose? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and sometimes your experiences shape the next video I make. And if you're here for stories about standing your ground, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Because trust me, this story's just getting started. I put my phone down, my chest tightening. My grandmother leaned forward, her voice low. Morgan, there's something you need to know, and it's not just about this trip. Her tone told me this was bigger than hurt feelings, bigger than family drama. And I had no idea that the truth she was about to hand me would burn everything I thought I knew to the ground. My grandmother didn't move right away. She just sat there studying me, her fingers curled around the porcelain teacup like she was weighing whether to pour out what she knew or keep it sealed forever. Finally, she set the cup down with a soft clink. You've always thought I was the one who built all this. She began gesturing around the room, the mahogany shelves lined with first editions, the antique rugs, the oil paintings of our ancestors that I'd grown up staring at. And you're right, but what you don't know is that I built it for you too. Her voice trembled just slightly, like this was harder for her to admit than I could imagine. When you and Ethan were still children, I created a trust fund, $5 million. Half for you, half for him. Equal because I believe in fairness. I believed your parents did too. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. I knew about the trust fund, at least I thought I did. Her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching. You knew about it because I wanted you to. But there's something I need to tell you, your share. It's not what you think it is anymore. Before I could respond, she reached to the side table and pulled out a worn leather folder. She slid it toward me like it was a live wire. I've been keeping track of every withdrawal, every transfer, every questionable loan from that fund. And Morgan, I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. I opened it and the pages seemed to scream up at me. Bank statements with Ethan's name plastered all over them. 6 figures for a startup that had failed in under a year. Tuition payments for a private business school he dropped out of after 1 semester. A down payment on a condo in Miami. A $95,000 gift labeled as education support that somehow ended up funding his 3-month trip through Europe. All of it from my half of the trust. I could feel the heat rising in my face. They've been taking my money for years. She nodded. And that's not all. Your father has been preparing documents to transfer the family's entire hotel chain, every property, every asset into Ethan's name, completely cutting you out. The air felt like it was pressing down on me. The hotel's grandma, that's the one thing I thought. My voice broke. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, they'd let me be part of it. Her gaze softened. I know, but you were never part of their plan, and that's why I needed to tell you now before it's too late. I sat back, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't just about favoritism anymore. This was theft. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't wrap my head around. And it wasn't a mistake they'd planned it. They'd decided I didn't deserve a seat at the table, and they'd acted on it behind my back. She reached across the space between us and took my hand. You've spent your whole life trying to prove yourself to them. But Morgan, you don't need their approval. What you need is to protect yourself. I stared at her, my throat tight. And what does that mean? It means, she said slowly, that you stop waiting for them to do the right thing. You fight for what's yours. Her words hit me like a jolt. I'd spent so many years swallowing my pride, telling myself that if I kept my head down, they'd see me as worthy. But this was proof they never would. And yet there was a flicker of something beneath the anger. Not just rage, not just heartbreak, but a sharp, cold focus starting to take root. She squeezed my hand one last time before letting go. I can't fight this battle for you, Morgan, but I can give you the truth. The rest is up to you. I closed the folder and felt its weight in my lap. It wasn't just paper, it was a weapon. And for the first time in my life, I knew I might just be willing to use it. I didn't sleep that night. The folder sat on the coffee table in front of me, its edges catching the light from the lamp like it was daring me to open it again. I'd already memorized the numbers, but I kept flipping through them anyway, page after page of theft, disguised as family planning. Around 6 a.m., I gave up pretending to rest. I showered, dressed, and tried to shake off the fog in my head. That's when my grandmother walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're going to need your strength," she said, setting one in front of me. For what I asked, though, I already had a sinking feeling in my stomach. She took a slow sip before answering. "For what comes next? They'll find out soon enough, you know. And when they do, they won't apologize, they'll double down." I leaned back, letting the words sink in. "So what, I just wait for them to make their next move?" Her lips curved into something that was almost a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "No, you prepare. Because when they strike, you won't be caught off guard again." And just like that, the phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. I didn't want to answer, but some part of me needed to hear her voice, needed to know if she'd even try to justify what she'd done. "Morgan," she began, her tone syrupy sweet in a way that made my skin crawl. "I was just thinking it's been too long since we've had a proper family get-together. Why don't you come over tonight? We'll have dinner, talk things through." Talk things through. Like this was some minor disagreement, like she hadn't stolen my inheritance and cut me out of the family business. "What's the occasion?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh, nothing special, just family time." The same words I'd read under Ethan's smug vacation photo. My chest tightened. This wasn't an olive branch, it was bait. "I'll think about it," I said before hanging up. My grandmother raised an eyebrow. "They want you back in their house. That's not a dinner, it's a performance. They'll try to spin their story, make you look unreasonable." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe I shouldn't go." She shook her head. "No, you go, but you don't go alone." Which is how that evening I found myself pulling into my parents' circular driveway with my grandmother in the passenger seat and the leather folder tucked safely in my bag. The moment we stepped inside, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled the air, but it did nothing to soften the tension. My father stood at the head of the dining table, arms spread in mock welcome. Ethan was slouched in a chair, scrolling on his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. "Morgan," my dad said, "good to see you. Let's put all this unpleasantness behind us." I almost laughed. Unpleasantness. That was his word for years of theft and betrayal. Dinner began, but the conversation was as carefully staged as the meal. My parents talked about the hotel's new contracts, upcoming renovations, as though the business had nothing to do with me. They spoke in the royal, we deliberately excluding me from every sentence. Halfway through, my father finally turned to me. "I know you've been upset, but you have to understand, we've made decisions in the best interest of the family." There it was again, that word family used like a weapon. I set down my fork, my pulse steady now. Best interest for which family member? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been funneling everything to Ethan. Ethan scoffed without looking up from his phone. "Don't be dramatic." I locked eyes with my father. "I'm not being dramatic. I have the bank statements, the trust documents, every withdrawal, every misused dollar." For the first time all night, my father's smile faltered. My mother's hand twitched against her wineglass. And in that moment, I knew my grandmother had been right. This wasn't just dinner, it was the opening move in a war. The silence that followed my words was thick enough to choke on. My father's hand tightened around his knife until his knuckles went pale, while my mother stared at her plate, as if she could will herself into disappearing. Ethan, of course, smirked, like this was just another one of my episodes. "I don't know what you think you have," my father finally said, his tone low and clipped, "but dragging this nonsense into my home is unacceptable." I didn't flinch. "What I have," I replied evenly, "is proof. And if you push me, I'll make sure the right people see it." That got his attention. His eyes narrowed. My mother let out a sharp breath, then tried a different tactic, one I'd seen her use on employees, neighbors, anyone who threatened to make waves. "Morgan, sweetheart, you've always been emotional. You misinterpret things. That's why your father and I make the decisions. We know what's best for everyone." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Best for everyone, you mean best for Ethan? Ethan finally set his phone down, leaning back in his chair like a bored king. "You're just mad you didn't work the system like I did." And that was the moment something in me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. They weren't ashamed, they weren't sorry. They were comfortable with what they'd done, because they'd convinced themselves I wouldn't fight back. I took a slow sip of water, letting the pause stretch. "You know, I said I used to think if I worked hard enough I'd earn a seat at the table. But now I see this table was never meant for me." My grandmother's voice cut in steady and sharp. "That's where you're wrong, Ethan. Morgan earned more than a seat, she earned the whole damn table. The look on Ethan's face was priceless, a crack in his smug facade. My father turned toward her, his jaw tight. "Eleanor, this is between us and our daughter." "No," she interrupted, "this is between right and wrong. And I won't sit quietly while you strip her of what's hers." My pulse was pounding, but I kept my voice level. "Here's the thing, you've taken a lot from me, but the one thing you can't take is my choice about what happens next." I stood, pushing my chair back. The sound echoed in the dining room. "And what happens next," I continued, "isn't going to be decided in secret meetings or family vacations I'm not invited to." My mother's eyes darted nervously between me and my grandmother. "Morgan, let's not escalate." "Too late," I said. "You escalated the day you decided my future belonged to someone else." I picked up my bag, the leather folder inside like a live current against my side. My father started to speak again, but I held up a hand. "Save it. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." As I headed toward the door, my grandmother followed. But before I stepped outside, I turned back just once. "You think this conversation is over? It's not. This was just the warning shot." We left them sitting there, the scent of roasted chicken now sour in the air. Once in the car, my grandmother gave me a long look. "You did well," she said, "but this was the easy part." I gripped the steering wheel, feeling that cold, sharp determination settle in again. "Then we'd better make a plan. And before we go further, tell me something. If someone took what was yours and didn't think you'd fight back, what would you do? I want to know. Drop it in the comments because your answers might just spark the next step in this story." As we drove away from that house, I realized something important. This wasn't just about getting back what was mine. It was about showing them, and maybe myself, that I was done being invisible. By the time we pulled into my grandmother's driveway, the night air had cooled enough to make me shiver, though it had nothing to do with the temperature. The confrontation at dinner kept replaying in my head, each smug look from Ethan and each condescending word from my parents etching deeper into my memory like scratches on glass. We went inside and I sank into the couch while my grandmother disappeared into her study. She returned a few minutes later holding her iPad. Without a word, she handed it to me. On the screen was Ethan's latest social media post, a carousel of sun-soaked photos from that Bahamas trip. Him in aviator sunglasses on a yacht, him laughing with my parents over plates of lobster, him lounging in a cabana with a drink the color of sunset. The caption read, "Grind now, relax later. Paid my dues." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Paid his dues with whose money? "Yours," my grandmother said simply. I swiped through the images again, my fingers tightening with each smug grin and staged toast. It wasn't just that they'd gone without me. It was that they were flaunting it, broadcasting their unity to the world while erasing me entirely. I tossed the iPad onto the coffee table, my chest tight. It's like they want me to see it, like they enjoy it. "They do," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "This is about control. As long as you stay silent, they win." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Then silence isn't an option anymore. She studied me for a long moment, then reached into the side pocket of her tote bag. When she pulled her hand back, she was holding a small key. She slid it across the table toward me. "This," she said, "opens the safe in my office. There's more in there, documents, receipts, contracts that they'd burn to ashes if they knew I had them. It's not enough to confront them with words. You'll need something that holds up in court." I took the key, feeling the cool metal against my palm. "So you're saying we go legal?" "I'm saying," she replied, "we stop playing by their rules." The next hour was a blur of unlocking the safe, sorting through folders and scanning pages into a password-protected drive. We found property deeds showing assets moved into Ethan's name offshore account ledgers that made no sense, and internal memos from the hotel chain hinting at strategic restructuring that would conveniently exclude me. By the time we were done, I felt like I'd swallowed a stone. "They've been planning this for years," I said. She nodded. "And they counted on you being too loyal or too afraid to fight back." I leaned back, letting the ceiling fan's hum fill the silence. "I'm not afraid. Not anymore." She smiled faintly. "Good, because the next steps won't be easy." We sat there for a moment, the weight of what was ahead pressing down on both of us. Then my grandmother stood, her voice soft but certain. "Get some rest, Morgan. Tomorrow we start taking back what's yours." I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlpool of strategy and what-ifs. Every time doubt tried to creep in, whispering that I was going up against my own parents, that maybe this was too much, I remembered Ethan's smirk, my father's dismissive tone, my mother's fake sweetness. They'd taught me my whole life that family loyalty meant obedience. But loyalty without respect is just servitude. And I'd served long enough. Morning light spilled through the curtains, but it felt different, sharper, almost surgical, cutting away whatever illusions I still had left about my family. I woke with a single thought pounding in my head. If they'd take my money so easily, what else have they stolen? My grandmother was already in her study when I walked in, a steaming mug of coffee in front of her, and that leather folder from yesterday spread open. She didn't look up. "I've been thinking," she said, "it's time you knew just how deep this goes." I pulled up a chair, deeper than siphoning my trust fund and handing the hotels to Ethan. Her eyes finally met mine, and there was something in them that made my stomach tighten. "Deeper," she confirmed. "They've been leveraging the hotel chain's equity to fund side ventures, ones that fail conveniently, but not before funneling money into accounts you're not supposed to know about." She handed me a stack of documents, loan agreements, shell company filings, payment schedules. Each paper told the same story: the assets were being bled dry, just slowly enough to avoid obvious suspicion. "They're trying to hollow it out," I murmured. "Exactly," she said. "When they transfer the hotels to Ethan, the paper value will look high, but the actual liquidity will be gone. It's a smokescreen. By the time you or anyone realizes it, it'll be too late to recover anything." I sat back, the weight of her words settling over me like a lead blanket. "So they're not just cutting me out, they're burning the whole thing down to make sure no one else can have it." She nodded grimly. "And if they succeed, it's not just your inheritance at stake. It's the jobs of hundreds of employees, the livelihoods of families who've worked there for decades." That hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was structural, an entire ecosystem being sacrificed for Ethan's comfort and my parents' control. I pushed the documents away, rubbing my temples. "So what's the play? Do we go to the press? The board?" "Not yet," she said. "If you move too soon, they'll bury the evidence. We need a partner, someone who knows the system and won't flinch when it gets ugly." I thought about that for a moment, then a name came to me like a spark in the dark. Aunt Rachel. Her eyebrow lifted, the corporate attorney. "She left the family years ago because she couldn't stand how Dad ran things," I reminded her. "If anyone's motivated to help me bring them down, it's her." Within an hour, we were on a video call. Rachel's face appeared on screen, her sharp features framed by a backdrop of legal books. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Eleanor says you've got a problem, big enough to make me pick up the phone before coffee." I gave her the short version: trust fund, drained hotels being funneled to Ethan Shell Company's bleeding assets. She listened without interrupting her pen, moving quickly over a legal pad. When I finished, she set the pen down and leaned forward. "Morgan, this isn't just a family dispute. This is fraud. And if those offshore accounts are real, it's potentially criminal." I felt my pulse quicken. "So we can stop them." Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Oh, we can do more than stop them. We can make sure they never see the inside of a boardroom again." For the first time in days, I felt something close to hope. Rachel promised to fly in the next morning, bringing with her a list of legal steps that would freeze the hotel's transfer and subpoena the financial records before they could vanish. After the call, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "It's starting," I said to my grandmother. She gave a single nod. "Good. Let them think you're still the obedient daughter for a little while longer. It'll make the strike that much cleaner." And as I looked at the pile of evidence in front of me, I realized something: they'd built their empire on the belief that I'd never fight back. That belief was about to cost them everything. Rachel arrived the next morning just as the sun was burning away the last of the mist clinging to the driveway. She stepped out of a sleek black sedan in a tailored navy suit, the kind of presence that announces itself before a word is spoken. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp, scanning me like she was already cataloging the angles of this fight. Inside, we spread the documents across my grandmother's dining table: trust statements, shell company records, loan agreements, property deeds. Rachel moved through them like a surgeon, marking pages with sticky notes, scribbling case law references in the margins. "This," she said, tapping a particular bank statement, "is your smoking gun. Funds transferred from the trust directly into an LLC Ethan owns, which then loaned the same amount back to the hotel chain at an inflated interest rate. That's self-dealing, and in this state, it's illegal." She flipped to another set of pages. "And here offshore accounts in the Caymans and Belize. These could trigger federal charges if we can prove the source is misappropriated funds." I leaned forward, feeling that tight, focused heat in my chest again. "So what's our timeline?" Rachel glanced up. "We move now." Today, we file an injunction to freeze the transfer of the hotels. That buys us time to collect more evidence and bring in regulators before your parents can make their next move. My grandmother, quiet until now, spoke up. And what about the PR side? They've cultivated this perfect image for decades. Rachel's smile was quick and razor-edged. That's our leverage. If we hint to the right people that Harris Hotels might be under federal scrutiny, the board will panic. Investors will start asking questions. Your parents will be too busy putting out fires to notice the building is burning from the inside. We spent hours mapping out the sequence legal filings, strategic leaks, targeted meetings with key shareholders. Every step was designed to corner them from both the inside and the outside, leaving no room for a graceful escape. By early afternoon, we had a plan, and I had my first real role in it. You're the one who's going to light the match, Rachel said. Your parents have underestimated you because you've always played by their rules. That ends now. You'll make the first move public, and it needs to hit them where they live their reputation. The idea made my pulse race, but it also felt right. So I go public before we file. Exactly, she said. You control the narrative. By the time the injunction lands on their desk, the story's already out there. I looked at my grandmother. She gave me the smallest nod. That night, I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, the cursor blinking in the Instagram caption box. I thought about the Bahamas photos, the years of being overlooked, the folder full of proof sitting on the table beside me. And then I started typing. Funny how family loyalty works. My parents lied about my grandmother's health to keep me away from a family vacation while they drained my $5 million trust fund and set up a scheme to hand our entire hotel chain to my brother. They thought I'd never find out. They were wrong. I hit post before I could second-guess myself. Within minutes, my notifications exploded. Likes, comments, direct messages from distant relatives, old friends, even journalists. People were tagging each other, asking if it was true, wondering what had happened to the Golden Harris family image. I set the phone down, my heart pounding, not from fear but from the rush of finally taking a swing. Rachel looked at me across the table. Welcome to the first day of taking your life back. The post spread faster than I could have imagined. By morning, it was everywhere, screenshots on Twitter threads dissecting every line, reposts on Facebook with captions like, "The Harris family isn't what they seem." Even LinkedIn wasn't safe. Old colleagues were messaging me with thinly veiled curiosity, asking if the rumors were true. The first call came from Ethan. His name flashed on my phone like a warning sign. "What the hell, Morgan?" he hissed the second I answered. "You're making Mom and Dad look like criminals." I kept my voice calm. "They lied to me, Ethan. They stole from me. If you think I'm going to pretend it didn't happen just to keep their image intact, you're out of your mind." "It's complicated," he began. "No," I cut in, "it's simple. You lived off money that was supposed to be mine, and you didn't even blink." There was a pause, and then he hung up. Not 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her voice was ice. "Morgan, take the post down, now." Why, I asked. "Because the truth is inconvenient." "You're embarrassing us," she snapped. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You embarrassed yourself when you faked Grandma's injury, emptied my trust fund, and planned to hand Ethan the business." She started to speak, but I'd already decided this conversation was over. "We're not negotiating, Mom. We're done." And I ended the call. By midday, Rachel had filed the injunction to freeze the hotel transfer. The document was already making its way through the legal channels when the next wave hit. A reporter from a major business magazine emailed me asking for an interview about corporate misconduct in family-run empires. Rachel advised me to hold off, but she also saw the opportunity. If they know the press is circling, she said, they'll start scrambling. That's when we push harder. That afternoon, my grandmother and I met with her old friend Samuel, a retired board member who still had deep connections within Harris Hotels. He'd already seen my post, and the concern on his face told me all I needed to know. "Investors are jittery," he said. "If what you're saying is true, they'll want a clean break before the scandal spreads." Rachel leaned forward. "Then let's give them reason to make that break." The plan was simple. Samuel would discreetly inform certain shareholders that regulatory scrutiny might be coming. Meanwhile, Rachel would push for a board meeting under the guise of addressing operational concerns. It was a two-pronged approach: pressure from the inside, heat from the outside. That night, as I sat with my phone again, I couldn't help scrolling through the hundreds of comments under my post. Some were supportive, others skeptical, but one theme kept repeating: "I can't believe you're standing up to them. I'd be too scared." And that's when it hit me. There was power in telling the truth, but there was also responsibility. If you've ever been in a situation where speaking out meant risking everything, you know the fear I'm talking about. But here's what I've learned. Fear loses its grip the moment you act. I want you to think about one thing in your life you've stayed quiet about for too long. Share it here in the comments with a friend in a journal. Just don't let it stay locked inside. That's how change starts. As I set my phone down, the weight in my chest felt different. Not lighter exactly, but steadier, anchored in the knowledge that for the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to my family's moves. I was making my own. By the next morning, the ripples had become waves. News alerts pinged on my phone before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Sources close to Harris Hotels report possible internal dispute. Anonymous claims of financial misconduct in Harris family luxury hotel chain faces mounting questions. Rachel arrived at my grandmother's house with a laptop under one arm and a stack of printed emails under the other. "They're bleeding," she said without preamble. "And now's the time to press." She pulled up a list of incoming calls and messages from board members to my parents. Half the board wants an emergency meeting. Investors are demanding answers. And this is my favorite: 3 employees have already sent me internal memos that support your claims. My grandmother leaned back, a small smile tugging at her lips. Looks like the image is cracking. It wasn't just the investors. Former employees had started speaking out, leaving anonymous comments under articles sharing stories of unpaid wages, sudden layoffs, and accounting irregularities that were brushed under the rug. One particularly damning thread detailed how renovation budgets were quietly siphoned into consulting fees for Ethan's so-called ventures. "They can't plug this many leaks at once," Rachel said, scrolling through the posts. "If we keep feeding the fire, they'll be too busy defending themselves to attack you directly." Still, I knew my parents wouldn't go down without a fight. And sure enough, by midday, they'd made their counter-move, a glossy PR statement from the office of the Harris family, claiming the allegations were misunderstandings, the result of internal family disagreements blown out of proportion. They painted me as a disgruntled daughter, misinformed about business decisions, acting out of emotion rather than fact. It might have worked if we hadn't been ready. Rachel had anticipated this and prepped me with a simple response. I posted it within minutes. "Facts don't care about family spin. Every document I've shared is verifiable. More to come." The comments exploded again, but this time the momentum was on my side. People began tagging investigative journalists, calling for audits, demanding the SEC take notice. By late afternoon, Rachel got a call from a contact at the state attorney's office. "They're looking into the trust fund withdrawals," she told me. "If they confirm what we have, this goes from civil to criminal fast." I sat there, letting the weight of that sink in. Criminal. That word felt like a blade-sharp final. For years, I'd wanted my parents to acknowledge me, to treat me as part of the family. Now I realized the only acknowledgement I wanted was for them to face the consequences. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number: "Meet me tomorrow at noon. We need to talk alone. Don't tell your aunt or Eleanor." It was signed simply Dad. I stared at it for a long moment, torn between curiosity and suspicion. Was this a trap, a plea, or just another attempt to control the narrative? Rachel, when I showed her, didn't hesitate. "You don't go alone. We record everything. If he's desperate enough to reach out directly, he might give us something we can use." I nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure he does." And deep down, I knew tomorrow wouldn't just be another meeting. It would be the first time I looked my father in the eye since the night at their house, the first time he'd see that the daughter he dismissed wasn't coming to ask for scraps anymore. She was coming to collect. The next day, I arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early. Not because I wanted to, but because I refused to let my father see me rush in like I was chasing his approval. I chose a corner booth, one that gave me a clear view of the door and the street outside. Rachel was parked 2 blocks away, in her car phone on standby, recording app open. My grandmother had insisted on a small microphone pinned under my sweater, just in case. At exactly noon, he walked in. Impeccably dressed as always, navy suit tailored within an inch of its life, but the sharpness in his eyes was dulled. He scanned the cafe, spotted me, and forced a smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. "Morgan," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look well." I didn't return the compliment. "Let's skip the small talk. What do you want?" He glanced around as if making sure no one was close enough to hear, then leaned forward. "You've made quite the mess. The post, the lawyers, the insinuations. This isn't good for anyone." I kept my tone even. "It's not good for you. It's the first good thing that's happened to me in years." His jaw tightened. We can fix this. Quietly. You take down your post issue a statement saying you were misinformed, and in return he paused, lowering his voice. I'll arrange a settlement. Cash. Enough to make you comfortable. I almost laughed. You think I'm doing this for a payout? He sat back, his expression hardening. Everyone has a price. Not me, I said, and certainly not when the price is my silence. His fingers drummed against the table. You don't understand how much damage you're doing. The hotel's our name, it's all at risk. Once you drag the government into this, there's no coming back. I leaned in, matching his intensity. That's the point. You don't get to build an empire on theft and favoritism, then hide behind the family crest when it's convenient. You crossed a line, and now you're worried, because there's finally someone pushing back. His nostrils flared. You're making a mistake. This fight will get ugly, and when it does, you won't like what comes out. I met his gaze steady. Then make it ugly. I've been living with ugly for years. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick-charged. Then he reached into his briefcase and slid an envelope across the table. Think about it, he said. Walk away now, and you can still have a life without burning every bridge. I didn't touch it. Those bridges were never real. You just painted them to look that way. His lips pressed into a thin line. You've changed. I stood, pushing my chair back. No, I just stopped playing the part you wrote for me. As I walked out, I could feel his eyes on my back, but I didn't look over my shoulder. Outside, I went straight to Rachel's car. She'd been listening the whole time. That envelope, she asked. Didn't open it. Don't care what's in it, I replied. But I bet it's enough to prove intent if we need it. Rachel smiled faintly. Good, then we'll add it to the pile. Driving away, I realized something had shifted. That meeting wasn't just a failed attempt at a bribe, it was proof he knew he was cornered. And when someone like my father feels cornered, they make mistakes. Mistakes I was ready to catch. 2 days after the cafe meeting, the first crack turned into a fissure. An anonymous email landed in Rachel's inbox. No greeting, no signature, just a subject line. You should see this. Attached were internal emails between my parents and Ethan, detailing their timeline for moving the hotel chain into Ethan's name, and instructions for transferring remaining assets to offshore accounts. Rachel's eyes lit up as she scrolled. This is exactly what we needed. Not only is it proof of intent, it shows they knew what they were doing was illegal. My grandmother leaned over her shoulder. Who sent it? No clue, Rachel replied. But given the timing, I'd bet it's someone inside the company who's had enough. We spent the rest of the morning combing through the files, highlighting damning phrases, minimize Morgan's awareness, complete transfer before audit, liquidate at market high before exposure. Each line was another nail in the coffin. By afternoon, Rachel was drafting a motion to present this to the court. Once this is filed, the injunction will be bulletproof. They can't move anything without risking contempt of court and possible arrest. I should have felt victorious, but instead, there was a knot in my stomach. My parents had built their lives on manipulation. Backing them into a corner meant they might lash out in ways we couldn't predict. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number again. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming. Watch yourself. I stared at it for a long moment before showing Rachel. She frowned. Classic intimidation. It means we're close to breaking them. I set the phone down, trying to push away the unease. Then we keep going. That night, I sat at my desk, drafting my next post. This time, I didn't just share accusations, I posted screenshots of the emails with sensitive account numbers blacked out. The caption was simple, here's the truth in their own words. Within hours, the post was everywhere, shared by journalists, dissected in podcasts, debated on business news segments. Hashtags with my family's name started trending, and the comments section turned into a rallying point for people who'd been in similar battles. I scrolled through the flood of messages, and one stood out, "Don't stop. You're giving the rest of us hope." It hit me that this fight had become bigger than me. Every move I made was being watched by people who'd been silenced in their own lives, waiting to see if someone like them could win. And that's why I need you here with me. If you've been following this from the start, don't just watch Speak Up. Tell me in the comments what you'd do if you had the proof in your hands. Because we're not at the end yet, and the twist you're about to hear changes everything. I set my phone down, the hum of adrenaline mixing with exhaustion. In the quiet of my room, I could almost hear my grandmother's voice from years ago. One day, you'll have to choose between keeping the peace and protecting what's yours. I'd made my choice. The knock came early, 7:14 a.m., sharp and deliberate. I'd barely taken my first sip of coffee when Rachel called from the driveway. "You're going to want to open the door, Morgan. Now." When I swung it open, she was standing there with two people in dark suits. Their IDs flashed in unison, Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Ms. Harris," the taller agent asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "We have a warrant to seize financial records related to Harris Hotels and associated trusts. We also have reason to believe assets have been transferred offshore in violation of state and federal law." I stepped aside, adrenaline thundering in my ears. "Come in." My grandmother appeared from the kitchen, her robe tied tight, eyes sharp despite the early hour. "Took you long enough," she muttered. The agents set up in the dining room laptops, open portable scanners humming. Rachel explained that last night's post with those internal emails had triggered not just media interest, but official attention. "They can't ignore written proof like that," she said. "And once federal jurisdiction kicks in, the whole game changes." By mid-morning, the agents had what they needed from us, and were heading to the downtown corporate offices straight to my parents. Rachel's phone buzzed 15 minutes later, with an update from her contact inside the building. "They're there now," Rachel relayed, glancing at me. "And your parents aren't handling it well." That was putting it lightly. An hour later, we had confirmation my father and mother had been taken into custody for questioning. Ethan had shown up mid-chaos, red-faced and shouting, only to be escorted out by security. Rachel didn't smile, but her voice held an edge of satisfaction. "This is the break we've been working toward." I sat back, trying to process it. For so long, the idea of my parents facing consequences had been abstract, something I barely allowed myself to picture. Now it was real agents, warrants, custody. And instead of triumph, I felt steady, focused. Like we still had one more bridge to cross before calling this a win. That bridge came into view around 3 p.m., when Rachel spread out a fresh set of papers on the table. "These," she said, "are motions to nullify the transfer of the hotels. With them in custody, the judge will be more inclined to freeze their control entirely." My grandmother reached for my hand under the table. "Morgan, once you sign this, you're not just defending your share anymore. You're taking full control." I thought about the years of being left out of decisions, of hearing about family meetings after they'd already happened, of working twice as hard to earn half as much. "Then I'll sign," I said, picking up the pen. As the ink dried, Rachel gave a rare grin. "Tomorrow morning you'll walk into that office not as the overlooked daughter, but as the owner." I exhaled slowly, feeling the shift in my chest. "Then let's make tomorrow count." Because here's the thing, we're about to step into the part where the playing field tilts completely. If you've been waiting to see how this ends, you'll want to stick around. The twist coming next is the one my parents never saw coming, and it's the reason they lost everything. I closed the folder, the sound of the clasp clicking shut like the final note before a crescendo. Tomorrow wasn't just a date on the calendar anymore. It was the day I stopped defending what was mine and started claiming it. The next morning I stood outside the Harris Hotel's headquarters with Rachel on one side and my grandmother on the other. The city was just waking up, sunlight glinting off the mirrored facade of the building. I'd walked into this lobby countless times before, always as the outsider, the afterthought. But today, the heavy envelope in my bag told a different story. When the elevator doors slid open onto the executive floor, the air hit me with the sterile chill of over-conditioned air. A receptionist who had always avoided my gaze now froze mid-sentence. "Ms. Harris," she stammered, "your parents aren't available." I finished for her. "I'm here to see the board." In the corner office, my father's domain, the blinds were half-closed papers, stacked in chaotic piles, and the faint smell of shredded documents hung in the air. Ethan was there, pacing. When he saw me, his face twisted. "You don't belong here," he spat. I reached into my bag and laid the contract on the desk with deliberate care. "Actually," I said, meeting his glare, "I do. And so do the federal agents who executed warrants yesterday." The door opened behind me and two board members stepped in, trailed by Samuel, the retired director who'd quietly been on our side. "Morgan," he said, shaking my hand, "we've reviewed the evidence." He turned to Ethan. "The board has voted to remove any interim control you or your parents claim to have." Ethan's mouth opened, but I didn't give him the chance. "The clause in this contract," I said, tapping the page, "states that proven dishonesty results in immediate forfeiture of control. The documents, the bank records, the emails, they're all proof." He lunged forward, but Rachel stepped between us, calm as ever. "Careful, Ethan. Threats and physical intimidation will only add to the case against you." From the corner, my grandmother's voice cut through the tension. You've had years to prove yourself worthy of this business, and all you've done is prove you can't be trusted. One of the board members handed me a folder. Effective immediately, you are recognized as the sole owner of Harris Hotels. We'll need your signature on these to begin formal transition. The pen felt surprisingly heavy in my hand. As I signed, Ethan muttered something about me being ungrateful and ruining the family. I looked up, meeting his eyes with a steady calm I didn't feel the last time I saw him. You ruined it yourself, I said. All I did was stop you from taking the rest. Rachel closed the folder and handed it back to the board. We'll also be initiating an independent audit of all prior transactions. If there are additional misappropriations, they'll be forwarded to the authorities. Ethan's face went pale. He backed toward the door, but not before hissing, "You'll regret this." I let a small, deliberate smile spread across my face. No, I'll remember it. When he was gone, I turned to the board. We have work to do, back wages to pay, renovations to resume, a culture to rebuild. I'm not here to be a figurehead. I'm here to run this company the way it should have been run all along. As the meeting adjourned, Samuel lingered for a moment. Your grandmother was right, he said quietly. You earned the whole table. Walking out of that office, I felt the weight of years lift, not because I'd won a title or a company, but because I'd finally taken back the narrative they tried to write for me. Tomorrow would be about rebuilding. But today was about standing in the space they swore I'd never reach and knowing I'd claimed it on my own terms. 2 weeks later, I walked into the renovated lobby of Harris Hotels for the first time as its official owner. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and new leather furniture. The reception desk gleamed, and the staff, most of whom had been working here for decades, looked up with smiles that didn't feel forced for once. "Morning, Ms. Harris," the concierge greeted, standing a little taller. The pride in his voice hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just a building. This was a statement, one that said the era of fear and manipulation was over. In the boardroom upstairs, sunlight poured across the long table. It wasn't lost on me that I now sat at its head. On my right, Rachel had her laptop open ready with progress reports. On my left, my grandmother was reviewing plans for the staff profit-sharing program we'd promised. The mood was alive with momentum. First order of business, I began, is reinstating the people who were pushed out for speaking up. I glanced at Rachel, who clicked to the first slide names and positions, many of them tied to projects my parents had scrapped out of spite. They'll be back with better contracts than before, and their health benefits will be restored. From across the table, Samuel nodded. That's going to change the culture in ways you can't measure on paper. And second, I continued, we're launching the Harris Foundation for Community Housing. 10% of profits will go toward building affordable units across the city. No more empty philanthropy, photo ops, real action. There was a pause, then quiet applause from the board. It felt different than any polite clapping I'd heard before. It felt earned. When the meeting wrapped, I stayed behind with Rachel. She leaned back in her chair. You know, she said, there's a whole audience out there who'd want to hear this story. Not just the business win, but the personal fight. You could inspire people stuck in situations like you were. I hesitated. For years, my life had been a closed-door war, but maybe opening that door was the real victory. I smiled. Then maybe it's time I tell it. And that's where you watching right now come in. If you've been following along, you know, this wasn't just about me getting back what was mine. It was about learning that silence feeds power to the wrong people. If this resonates with you, don't just sit with it, join this community. Share your story in the comments. Connect with others who face their own battles, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. The next chapter isn't just mine, it's ours. That afternoon, I walked the halls alone. Staff were laughing softly at the front desk. Housekeepers were joking as they pushed linen carts. Even the maintenance crew seemed lighter. I realized the victory wasn't in the corporate takeover, it was in giving people a place they were proud to work in again. At sunset, I stood outside on the steps, watching the sky turn molten orange. My grandmother joined me, her cane tapping lightly on the stone. You've done well, Morgan, she said, her voice gentle but proud. Your parents built an empire. You've built something better, a legacy. I thought of all the nights I'd doubted myself, all the moments I nearly walked away. It almost broke me, I admitted. But it didn't, she said simply. You walked through the fire and you're still here. I looked up at the glowing sign above the entrance. Harris Hotels. The name hadn't changed, but everything behind it had. That night, I went home to my quiet apartment. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to check over my shoulder. I brewed tea, sat by the window, and opened a blank notebook. Across the top of the first page, I wrote, Chapter 1, Taking Back the Table. Tomorrow, I'd start the rebuild in earnest. Tonight, I'd let myself breathe, because freedom I'd learned isn't a sudden explosion. It's the slow, steady realization that no one holds the pen to your story but you. When the dust finally settled, the court ruled decisively in my favor. Every cent of the $5 was returned, and my mother's schemes were exposed for what they truly were, a calculated betrayal, wrapped in the guise of family concern. She avoided prison only because of my grandfather's pleas for mercy, but her reputation was in tatters, and the rest of the family could no longer pretend they didn't know the truth. I didn't celebrate with champagne or victory speeches. Instead, I booked a solo trip to the mountains, a place where the air was thin, the nights were quiet, and no one knew my name. It was there, under a sky full of cold stars, that I realized something important. The fight had never been just about money. It was about drawing a line and saying, "This is where your power over me ends." I thought about the years I'd spent seeking approval, biting my tongue, and keeping the peace. That person was gone. In her place stood someone who could survive lies, manipulation, and even a mother's betrayal, and still walk away whole. Now, when I tell people my story, I don't focus on the theft or the courtroom drama. I tell them about the moment I chose my own freedom over keeping the family's facade intact. I tell them about the peace that comes from no longer needing validation from people who thrive on control. And every time I see it in their eyes, that spark of recognition. The quiet understanding that they too might have the strength to break free from whatever binds them. That's the real victory. Because in the end, the money can be returned, reputations can be rebuilt, but the courage to reclaim your life, that's something no one can steal.